Hi everyone, and welcome to Talking Faces with Tessa and Kay. I'm Dr. Tessa Flack, and I'm a senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Lincoln.
And I'm Kay Ritchie, and I'm also a senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Lincoln. Tessa and I work together in the Lincoln Face Lab in the School of Psychology, and most of our research focuses on face recognition. So what we're going to do in this video is talk through some key concepts in research methods in psychology, so aspects of experimental design and data analysis, but all in the context of our research on face recognition.
Face recognition, what's that all about then? So I think a lot of people probably don't realize that face perception is a really important area of study in psychology. If you think about faces and where you encounter them, you come across faces all the time, every day of your life, and they're really important to you. So they're important to recognize the people that you know, to understand how somebody's feeling from their facial expressions, and also simple things like what are they attending to.
Yeah, so the majority of our research in the Face Lab at Lincoln actually focuses on face recognition. So that is, how do we recognize people who are familiar to us? What happens when we're trying to look at the face of someone who's unfamiliar to us? And how does a face go from being unfamiliar to familiar? So how do we learn what new people look like? And this is actually a really important question for the real world as well, because a lot of the time, what we kind of appeal to in our research is the example of photo ID. So we're really used to using our face to verify that we are who we say we are. But actually, the job of the person checking your photo ID, so say the passport controller, is quite a difficult one. I don't know about you, but my passport photo is not the most flattering photo of me.
They never are, though, right?
They're
My
not.
driving license photo is terrible.
Yeah, same. So actually the person who's looking at that ID photo and looking at the person standing in front of them and trying to tell whether that's the same person or not, that's actually quite a difficult task. So we make an approximation of that photo ID checking task in our lab, and we call this a face matching test. So what we do is we just show you two photos side by side and we ask you, are these two photos of the same person or are they two different people? And there is actually a standard test of face matching ability. It's called the Glasgow face matching test. So you can have a go here. Do you think the two photos on the left show the same person or two different people? And the same for the photos on the right. Is that the same person or two different people? Well, actually, the photos on the left show two different people, and the photos on the right show the same person. And those photos on the right have been taken just seconds apart, but with two different cameras. So you can see how even just changing the camera can make the person's face look quite different. Now, that's important because this is an illustration of how when we don't know what someone looks like, it's actually quite hard to tell whether two images show the same person or not. Whereas if I show you an example of someone that you're familiar with, then it should be a lot easier to tell whether the photos show the same person or not. So here, if you know who Daniel Radcliffe is, even though those photos look really quite different, it should be easy for you to say, yeah, those are two photos of the same person. And the reason that we think that this task of unfamiliar face matching is difficult is that we find it really difficult to know what someone can look like in different photos. Once we're familiar with them, we've seen them look lots of different ways, so we can tell that two photos show them, whereas before we are familiar with them, we don't know that that same person can look those two different ways, say in their passport photo and standing in front of the passport controller.
Okay, so what we're going to do is just use one of Kay's fantastic experiments as an example to help us talk you through how we design experiments, how we test questions about face recognition ability. So over to you, Kay. Tell us about some of your fantastic research.
Well, as fantastic as it is, this is the paper that we're going to talk about today, so you can find it for yourself if you're interested in having a look at it. We're going to just talk about one of the experiments in that paper. It's from a few years ago now, but I think it's quite a good illustration of how to design and test this idea of unfamiliar face recognition. So what we did in this study is that we wanted to find out how good people were at recognizing two different, so this face matching test, two different photos of a familiar person or an unfamiliar person. But there's a few things that we have to think about there in terms of image selection. So if we just chose photos of like celebrities and then photos of non-celebrities, you might see quite a difference in what those photos look like. So photos of celebrities tend to look quite nice and polished.
Not like your blurry Instagram photos and stuff then.
Right, I'm not famed for my great Instagram photos. So if if we were to take photos of taken on the red carpet compared to my blurry Instagram photos, there's going to be a difference there. So
Yeah.
what we decided to do in this paper was we took photos of celebrities, but from 2 different countries. So we found celebrities who were well recognized in the UK, and we found celebrities that were well recognized in Australia, but both of those sets of celebrities weren't familiar in the other countries. And then what we did was we tested participants in the UK and participants in Australia. So you've got the same set of faces, say the UK celebrities are familiar in the UK, but unfamiliar in Australia. So if we find an effective familiarity, we know it's not because we've just like chosen easy photos of the familiar faces and difficult ones of the unfamiliar faces.
Because everyone's seeing the same pictures, right?
Exactly, everyone sees the same pictures. So that's a good point. We can't just use one celebrity in each country and say, did people get it right or wrong? When we're designing these experiments, we want to make sure that we're getting multiple, what we call trials. So multiple, is this the same person, yes or no? Next trial, is this the same person, yes or no? And we need to make sure we're doing that lots of times so that we can get an average of each person's performance.
So in this experiment, did it matter like what order you showed the images in? Did you randomize that across participants, for example?
Yeah, so that's something that's really key in a lot of psychology experiments, but particularly in face perception. We like to do something called randomization. So we just showed all the images in a completely random order. So you would see maybe a UK celebrity, then an Australian celebrity, then an Australian celebrity, then a UK celebrity. And that means that people aren't always seeing the same pairs in the same order. So you don't get an easy one followed by a hard one that might bias people's responses. So everything was shown in a completely random order and a different random order for each participant.
Yeah, and I suppose if the participants are getting a bit tired or bored towards the end, they're not always feeling that way on the same trials. So all of that kind of disappears.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you find out the answer then? So what do you need to do to be able to find out the answer to your question?
Yeah, okay. So I've already mentioned that everyone has taken part in multiple different trials. So the first thing we have to do is take their data and find out their average percent correct responses when they're seeing UK faces or when they're seeing Australian faces. And then for each participant, we also need to code whether they are in Australia or in the UK, so we know which faces are familiar to them.
So for each participant, you're going to get 2 numbers, basically how good they were with the UK faces and how good they were with the Australian faces.
Exactly that. That's exactly right. And then what we want to do is find out, are there differences between the UK and the Australian participants when they're looking at UK and Australian faces? So what we first of all do is plot our data as a graph. And what we want to find out is where are the differences? So down the y-axis, we've got their percent correct. And then across the bottom, we're blocking them by whether they're UK participants or Australian participants. So what might we see in the data? There's a few different things that we might see. So we're analysing these data using Anova, analysis of variance. Now, Tess is our resident stats expert. So Tess, can you tell us what Anova is in words of 2 syllables or fewer, please?
Sure. So ANOVA is actually my second favourite statistical test. I love a good ANOVA.
Wait, what's your favourite?
Multiple regression. I love a regression.
Lovely. Anyway,
okay, so ANOVA basically looks at the variance in your dependent variable. So here what we're looking at is percent correct, so basically how good people are. And we will see differences in how good people are in the 2 different conditions that we have. So what an ANOVA will tell you is, are the differences in people's percent correct actually because of the experimental manipulation, or is it just something random that's going on, how the participants were feeling, what the weather was like, that kind of thing. And what we want is for our data to be mostly explained by our experimental manipulation.
Right, brilliant. So there's a couple of different things we might see in ANOVA then. So in the context of this experiment, what we might see is just a main effect of the location of the celebrities, right? So in ANOVA, this is called a main effect. so that's both the UK participants and the Australian participants are just doing better with the UK celebrities' faces. So those blue bars are higher, their accuracy is higher for the UK celebrities than the Australian celebrities that are the pink bars. Or we might see a different type of main effect. So we might see the main effect of participant location. Again, in Anova, this is called main effect. So what we're seeing here is just, it doesn't matter where the celebrities have come from, the UK participants are just outperforming the Australian participants. So that's something else that is possible that we could find. But actually, what we did find was this lovely pattern of results, which in the context of Anova is called an interaction. So that means we're just seeing different performance by the UK and Australian participants when they're seeing the different UK or Australian celebrities. So that's an interaction. And so what we're seeing is that on the left there, the UK participants are doing better with the UK celebrities. And on the right, the Australian participants are doing better with the Australian celebrities. So that's exactly what we would expect. People are better at this face matching test with the people who are familiar to them compared to the people who are unfamiliar to them. But the other thing we did in this experiment was on every trial, as well as asking, okay, here's two photos, same person or two different people, we also asked people, what percentage of other people do you think would get this right? And the results from that were really interesting. So on the left, there's just the graph you just saw of the performance. And on the right, this is their prediction of other people's performance. So what you can see is that, broadly speaking, people are showing the same pattern of results. So the UK participants are guessing that other people would just do better with the UK celebrities' faces. And the Australian participants are guessing that other people would do better with the Australian celebrities' faces. Now that's important because it explains what we've called the photo ID paradox, which is if we know that unfamiliar face matching is difficult, then we know that someone who is looking at photo ID will be finding that comparison that they're making quite difficult. So why do we rely on photo ID all the time? And we've argued that that's because we're so good at familiar face recognition and we're not even aware that we're good at it because we're familiar with the people. We just think everyone will do better with those trials because we just think they're easier. So we think all face recognition is easy because we're so good with familiar faces.
So what does it all mean then?
Well, that's a big question, but we would argue that the importance of this study shows that we overestimate general face recognition abilities because we base our estimation on familiar face recognition when actually things like ID checking are an example of unfamiliar face recognition. So we would say this is a lovely image representing someone checking some photo ID, and this is the real world implication for this research. But of course, we also have theoretical implications. And that's the kind of stuff that we're following up now in the Face Lab at Lincoln in our more recent experiments. So if we know that unfamiliar face recognition is poor, what can we do to improve it? And what does that tell us in terms of theory about how we learn what new people look like?
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, Kay, for telling us about one of your fantastic experiments. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about face perception, but also about psychology, how you design an experiment to address a question you're interested in, and what you have to do with the data to try and find out the answer to the question. Thank you.